All right, welcome everybody. It is 2:30, so we are going to get started. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves in the chat. Before we begin, I just want to give a couple of tips for how to use Zoom, although I'm sure at this point we're all experts on virtual engagement. But if you are new to Zoom, there you have a toolbar. It's either going to be on the bottom or the top of your screen. This is where you can find the chat, the Q&A function, and other features. If you want to see who else is on, you can click on the participants. And again, when you're using the chat, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but we do ask that you select all panelists and attendees, not just all panelists. That way, later on in the webinar, if you have a great idea you want to share, it's not just us hearing it. We want everyone to be learning from each other during this webinar. And if anything is wonky on your screen, you actually have the power to resize or move things around just by clicking into your screen. So you have the power to do that. A couple of expectations and guidelines. We do have this chat feature and you can absolutely use it for sharing ideas, for communicating with each other, but we do ask that you use the Q&A feature for questions. That's just because sometimes things can get buried in the chat if it's really active, and we want to make sure we don't miss anything. So if you have an important question, please use the Q&A feature. Once again, I'll say it one more time. When using chat, please make sure your messages are being sent to all panelists and attendees. And of course, right now we are all working from home, so tech problems may happen. You might hear a dog barking in the back. Just bear with us as we are navigating through our new lives in COVID. So I am Claire Ratcliffe. I'm one of the education coordinators at the Space Science Institute, and I have the pleasure today of working with so many amazing people on the STEAM Equity Project. And I'm going to hand it over to BB, and I'll let the facilitators introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Phoebe Brown. I'm a program coordinator at American Library Association in the Public Programs Office. So excited to be here today. If you have any questions from ALA, I'll be in the chat ready to answer. And I'll pass it on to our lovely panelists.
Hi there, I'll jump in as a way to your other introduction. My name is Kellyanne LeConte, and I'm at the Space Science Institute in Boulder, Colorado, where we lead the Star Library Network, and I'm the project director for the STEAM Equity Project. And wonderful to have you all online with us today. Thanks so much for coming.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronica Casanova and I work at the Tulare County Library System in California. I am a rural librarian. I live and work in Exeter, California, a small community of about 10,000. And I do see there's a couple of the neighbors in Madera County here, so hello to all of you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Flo Trujillo. I'm president of Reforma de Nuevo Mexico. I'm out here in the Four Corners. Bienvenidos de Yataje. It's nice to see some of my neighbors in Colorado and also from New Mexico participating. I've recently retired as Youth Services Coordinator at the Farmington Public Library. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could join us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Ruiz, and I am the supervising librarian at Evanston Public Library for our new Robert Crown Library branch. I've been here for just shy of a year, and previously my role was as the Latino engagement librarian at Evanston Public Library. So I'm excited to share some tidbits with you here and excited to have everyone here to join us. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a great webinar planned for you today with some really exceptional facilitators. On the agenda for today, in true StarNet fashion, we will start with an icebreaker and a quick poll question. Then Kellyanne is going to give us an overview of the STEAM Equity Project. Veronica is going to define cultural responsiveness for us and give us a few key terms that will help throughout the rest of the webinar. Flo is going to give some awesome program examples that she has done and has had great success with in STEAM in libraries. And finally, Miguel is going to end it with talking about how to build these relationships and make lasting connections in your community. If we have time, we'll have a discussion and a Q&A at the end. So here's my icebreaker. You can go ahead and answer in the chat. But what is the strangest place you've worked remotely from? I love to hear people's stories. I myself have had some interesting places recently. I went back east to North Carolina for some family things and had to readjust to working remotely in a whole new place. And at one point I needed to make a recording for a video. And so in order to get some good acoustic sounds for that video, I was actually working in a hotel bathroom. So that's probably the strangest place I have worked remotely from during this time. All right, Colleen says the basement, which is where I am now. Tina says my car, backyard, closet, laundry room, a car in a parking lot, not the one they work at, a closet. Wow, these are coming in fast. I think I saw someone said a hot air balloon. I definitely want to know the story behind that. Yeah, Flo, at some point you and I are going to have to swap stories about how you worked on a hot air balloon. Backyard, patio, front porch. Some of these sound just really lovely to enjoy the nice fall weather that we're getting. A squatters community in Southern California, Slab City. Yeah, very interesting stuff. I never thought some of these places would be where we're working, but you know, 2020 is throwing us all kinds of challenges. Veronica says a pool. That sounds pretty nice. The passenger seat of my sister's car while we drove a foster dog up to its new family. That was the day they announced the shutdown, and my director and I were trying to coordinate how we were going to close and work from home. Yeah, a lot of things thrown our way that we've just had to problem solve really quickly, and it can lead us to some really interesting solutions for trying to keep doing our work while we're working remotely. Well, thank you for sharing that, guys. I always love to hear just how everyone is adapting to these new times. So I'm going to move on here. So here's a poll question, and I'm going to ask Bibi to launch it. So you'll be able to click right into this for your answers. But the question is, what features have you used to make virtual programs more engaging? We've definitely all been on a bit of a learning curve here on how, if we are doing virtual programs, how do we keep our patrons' attention? How do we keep it fun and exciting instead of just being talked at? So go ahead and choose your answers. I believe you can select all that apply. And if you do choose other, I would love for you to drop what that is in the chat, because if it's things some of us don't know about and could utilize to make our virtual programs more engaging, it would be awesome to hear any other features that you may have used. So we'll probably give you about 5 more seconds to answer. And Bibi, you can go ahead and share the results. All right, so it looks like the majority of you, well, a good mix, but 33% of you use poll questions. I think that's a fun way just to get people engaging beyond just the chat. The annotating tools is something I recently just kind of learned about how to use it in virtual programs through a conference I was at last week. It's really fun. It's when the participants can actually draw on the screen, so you can ask them a question and have them select answers by drawing on the screen. Breakout rooms are a good way to get small group discussions. Idea boards, if you haven't heard of those are a virtual sticky note system. So you can ask questions and people can type them, and it's basically a sticky note board. And word clouds, just 2% of you, and then other. So awesome. It looks like in the chat, some of these other results are using Mentimeter or menti.com for icebreaker polls. Let's see. Virtual classes and file submissions, and using, oh wow, Colleen shared they've had major success in a virtual programs where kids read to dogs using Google Meet. That sounds so fun. Awesome. Cool. Well, good to know what you guys are doing, and there's so many tools out there. If you guys want any feedback or suggestions on how to make your virtual programs more engaging, feel free to email me and I can give you some ideas. I am now going to turn it over to Kellyanne LeConte to talk about our STEAM Equity project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. And some of you on the line may already be familiar with the Star Library Network, but briefly, in case you are not, just to make sure you're welcome in, the Star Library Network provides science and technology related activities and resources, all for free for you to use in, particularly we're focused on helping public library staff bring STEM and STEAM to your communities. So we'd love for you to participate. For today, we're talking about our STEAM Equity project, where we're partnering here at the Space Science Institute with ALA, the Institute for Learning Innovation, the Sci Girls Project at Twin Cities PBS, and Education Development Center. And we're having a little bit of a slide error here. Let me just get this back to sharing. Thanks, Claire. And our vision is for tweens and their families to explore and have access to equitable STEAM learning and career paths, all while keeping in mind their interests, strengths, and diverse cultures as we do so. As a key part of this, we are particularly paying attention to and learning how to collaborate and co-create with Latino populations. And just to give you all a heads up, we do realize that we are speaking about human beings here. And so I'm going to leave this definition hanging a little bit, that we are using the term Latino populations to echo what's been in the census, but we realize that there's so much more that people are bringing to this conversation that we want to go past that label, and Veronica will be talking about that in a moment. A big thank you to our funders at the National Science Foundation and their Advancing Informal STEM Learning program, which is very focused on broadening participation in STEM. We are, as part of this project, learning with you, and would like to share that back out with others who are interested in this same kind of work. For the next several years, we'll have many opportunities for you all to participate in this project. We'd love to keep up the conversation and share the learning. In particular, we're looking for ways to network and share resources. When it's safe to do so, we'll be convening in-person meetings. And in the meantime, of course, we'll be looking for many opportunities to meet with you all online. Our next opportunity to meet in person would be the ALA annual conference next June. And our idea here is to give you a sense of some strategies that others have used, brainstorm new resources that you can bring into your programs, and of course, try different hands-on STEAM learning activities. And Flo has a very cool one that she'll be sharing just a moment as well. And Miguel has quite a bit of experience that he'll be sharing about this idea of reaching out with communities and having conversations about their needs. I also wanted to bring up another example just for you to have in your back pocket in the meantime. I realize that this is the time during this pandemic when we all really need our partners. So as you're developing relationships, building on the ones you have, or potentially adding to your Rolodex, so to speak, I encourage you to take a look at this video, which features the work of Lisa Jackson at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. Lisa has been working with us on our community dialogue framework and has so much to add to how you go about making a welcoming space for your community members so that they can help you decide, what do you do with your STEAM learning? Where do you want to go next, and how to do that together? From here, I'm going to turn it over to our fabulous Veronica.
Okay, well, welcome again to the webinar. I'm going to go back a slide. Claire, it doesn't seem to go back a slide. Oh, there. Okay, it's a little delay. Okay, there it is. So welcome again to today's webinar. We're going to start the conversation by defining the terms cultural responsiveness, Latinx, touch on why cultural responsiveness is important and why they should be used in our everyday practices as librarians. The first definition we're going to define is cultural responsiveness. Cultural responsiveness is widely used in the education field, and this definition comes from the National Center of Culturally Responsive Educational Systems. The definition reads, cultural responsiveness is the ability to learn from and relate respectfully with people of your own culture as well as those of other cultures. And trying to go to our next slide. Okay, so here is a second definition of cultural responsiveness. This comes from a popular research article, The Cultural Competence, a Conceptual Framework for Library and Information Science Professionals. And the definition reads, the ability to recognize the significance of culture in one's own life and in the lives of others, and to come to know and respect diverse cultural backgrounds and characteristics through interaction with individuals from diverse linguistic, cultural, social, economic groups, and to fully integrate culture of diverse groups in services, work, and institutions in order to enhance the lives of those being served by the library profession and those engaged in service. So this is a very complete definition, but I would also like to add that it is a circular and ongoing process because culture is forever changing and we as librarians continue to change with it, must continue to change with it for our library programs and patrons. Go to the next slide. Okay, so I put together this graphic for those of us that are visual learners, and I want to know a couple different things. The first one is that it is a circular process. So we're continually redefining and kind of embellishing and trying to figure out what does cultural responsiveness mean. These are some of the factors that influence cultural responsiveness. And I also want to note that cultural responsiveness changes over time. So it could be influenced by reading, travel, interaction with patrons, personal experiences. It's an ongoing and everyday process that keeps changing. So now that we have defined cultural responsiveness, I want to know, what does cultural responsiveness mean to you? How would you define cultural responsiveness? So go ahead and type in the chat box. Okay, so I see Anne not assuming my views are default. That's a very good one. It's kind of the idea, to me, how I put it in my own words, it's kind of the idea of knowing what your own culture is and how it's seen by others, but also stepping in the shoes of another person. Being respectful of other points of view, leaving them in space requires openness and humility. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Yes, listening, learning, sharing, and being open and sensitive to other views. So continue to keep on typing in the chat box, what do you think cultural responsiveness means to you? Again, this is kind of a conversation that we're having, and so we really want to think about what does it mean to me and how am I using it in my everyday practice as a librarian. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but continue to type in the chat box. So now we turn to the question, why is cultural responsiveness important? So it is important for many reasons, and I have listed 3. So number 1, patrons feel like they're respected and viewed as an important part of the library or community. Number 2, culturally responsive staff know how to integrate social, cultural, and linguistic information in a culturally sensitive manner. And number 3, It avoids tokenism for a program, and the program reflects a culturally authentic program. So in other words, we're trying to identify specific programs for specific patrons, not stereotyping populations, but creating programs that speak to our patrons. Next slide. Okay, so now we have defined the term cultural responsiveness. Now we want to go ahead and define the term Latinx. So Latinx was created out of a necessity of representation of other genders. Before we define the term Latinx, I want to go ahead and define the term Latino or Latina. A Latino or Latina is a person of Latin American descent, such as people from Mexico, Latin America, or the Caribbean islands. I want to note that the language only leaves room for the term Latino ending with an O, which is a masculine term, and the feminine term Latina ending with an A. Next slide. So knowing that the language only leaves room for Latino to define males and Latina to define males, females, we know that it is not inclusive of all genders. So the term Latinx was created. So Latinx is a gender neutral term designed to be inclusive of all females, males, trans, queer, and non-binary communities. It is a term that's gaining popularity as a recent Pew study has demonstrated that 3% of the population use it. So now that we have defined cultural responsiveness, highlighted its importance, and defined the term Latinx, it is through this lens that we would ask you to view this presentation. Now I will hand it over to Flo.
Thank you, Veronica. Well, now that you learned a little bit about cultural responsive programs, what's it going to look like? Will it be virtual? Many of you have shared that you've been using Zoom and Google Meet, and there's so many other platforms, but an in-person session is preferred. And during COVID, it would be a great opportunity to work with families and to learn the virtual world. Welcome and introduce yourselves to the families as they arrive for your in-library programs. You may notice that at this time if there are any language barriers, and that's very important. Sign in everyone for the session by having families design a name tag with their first name. Do you have that? If you are using a translation device, make sure that the translators explain to the families how to use the device. For virtual events, open the session no later than 15 minutes for families to arrive on screen. To make the families feel comfortable, you may need to share how to change the name on the screen, type in the chat room, explain the speaker view screen, and how to use the mute button. These are all just common things they're learning right now, but it's nice to review them. Start on time and have staff introduce their roles for this virtual session. Invite the families to introduce themselves, but you may know you might have to call on them, but make it fun. In this virtual world, I know we want to try to make it as in-person as possible, so try using a talking stick. Mine is this wonderful pencil that I have from Dia de los Muertos, if you can see it a little bit closer. It's a great opportunity to have someone pick something that they like and then send it off to the next person, and they also keep active by knowing who else is communicating with them and who else is on the screen with them as well. After introductions, set the ground rules for a virtual program, and don't forget to request that the families keep that mute button off unless they're going to talk. Some families may arrive late, but try to engage them in conversation whenever possible. During this program or for an in-library program, you may need to create an activity space, maybe a breakout room for children under the age of 6. This is where volunteers or additional staff can help you. If possible, designate a staff to help facilitate during the virtual session to let families into the virtual room and help with the questions that are coming up in the chat room. Okay, next slide is I'm going to go ahead and share. Can you identify STEAM in your community? Use this time during your session to create a community and library resource commercial. There's a wonderful link bank in the chat room that they just added that you can use. It's full of resources. But don't forget to share the local resources in your community, maybe the farmers markets, or maybe provide a map that includes free lunches and for breakfast and lunch programs. for the kids now that are in school or during the summertime. It's a great way to keep connected. If you have a food hub, a lot of the families may not even know about the resources available for WIC Family Market coupons. So share all of that information with them. While there, do you know how to cook a hot dog using solar energy? How can you use origami to start a garden? These are great questions. And all families that are invited to museums and libraries can find out a lot of that information. But invite your own family or invite families to attend or try to find a grower's tour. Libraries have the STEAM programs, they have the STEAM book lists, but we all know that food brings families together, and families could share a family cooking recipe together in a virtual event. Just recently, Team Latinas presented a virtual Zoom event to senior citizens on how to make a traditional Mexican melon smoothie. And they shared how they used other fruits they could use for the refreshing summer drink. It was really a lot of fun when these little Latina princesses were blending up those drinks. Athletes, medical professionals, astronauts, and scientists love sharing about their STEAM careers. And local colleges have medical students who want to volunteer for services hours and can provide some great inspiration. In the Latinx culture, don't forget about the adobe maker or the local herbalist. And did you know that a chile ristra is a STEAM project? Earlier, I was talking about the translation devices. Contact Enlace if they are in your area. Enlace is engaging Latino communities in education, and they're usually found in your local colleges. They usually have a translation device, and if you engage them as one of your partners, they will be happy to come in and be part of that program. They might even have ambassadors that can help you with that activity room for the kids that are under 6. Remember, in the virtual world, that rural and urban communities rely on libraries and community centers and coffee shops and more for the free Wi-Fi services. Schools are doing a wonderful job ensuring all students have a laptop and access to the internet for virtual lessons. But unfortunately, some families have shared they stop in a hotel parking lot or a Starbucks for the free Wi-Fi. And of course, school laptops are limited to the virtual lessons using the approved platforms. And research is limited. On my next slide, I want to share with you, with a little practice and a little determination, you can make a little casita, a hacienda pueblo, or just some type of ruin, and engage the families in their story. For instance, this story is about me being the oldest granddaughter. I enjoyed making mud pies. And my grandfather was a carpenter with 8 sons, and as our families grew, so did their home. My grandfather kept me busy, and he had me seed the dirt to make the sand and break up the straw that we fed to the animals and throw it into the wheelbarrow as he mixed the mud. He let me pour some of the mud into the pre-made squares, just like this one. This is a little example of one. And he leveled it off, and he left it to dry for a few weeks. When the adobe bricks are ready, we use them to build those extra rooms. This is a little fact about some of our adobes, but as I was mentioning about the stories, always remember to ask those open-ended questions. Families love to share the stories, and once you get them started, they can't wait to come for the next session. Well, this is what the adobe brick looks like. I broke it in half so that you would be able to see the inside part of it. Adobe bricks are always sun-dried, and this is just a miniature one, but they usually weigh about 35 pounds. And the clay is the smallest soil particle. The clay is called the arcilla. The arcilla is a binding agent like the glue that holds the sand and the straw and the brick. Then we have the sand. We have the arena. The arena is the sand particle that we can see, and it also strengthens the brick. Of course, you need to use some water to mix it also. And then we have the straw. The straw is, this is the paja, the straw. The straw serves as 2 purposes. It acts as the binding agent, just like the clay did, and it helps the brick to dry evenly. And it also reduces a lot of the cracking. Here's a little bit of the straw sticking out of the adobe that was put together with my little kit here. Now, I have to share with you also that if you're interested, at the end of the session or whenever you want to, just contact me. I have this self-contained educational kit for children and adults to make. This is a great little preservation project. The kit has the sand that I showed you, the arena. It has also the paja, the straw, and it has the arcilla, the clay, which are all items that you can find in your backyard. And it's very easy to also create one of these cute little molds. You can also use a cookie cutter, but don't do stars or anything for adobe. That won't come out very well, but you can try it as a STEM project too. Well, on my next slide, I have to tell you that living in New Mexico, I am very familiar with Explora. Most of you have those wonderful science centers in your community. Explora and I work really well together with Reforma de Nuevo Mexico, and it offers some great interactive experiences in STEAM and provides bilingual activity cards for me with a simple experiment. These are the cards here. In fact, this one is a helicopter. This is, it's also helicópteros de papel. So I like it because it has the experiment. It also has a bibliography of books here, and I like it because it's very detailed. It's very detailed, and it shows a picture of how it works. And on the flip side, all of these are downloadable. Make sure you get on the link bank that's in your chat room to be able to download these through the links that are available. This is the translation in Spanish. So these wonderful cards are downloadable. That one was helicopters. I love this one on static electricity. Don't you just love that little character right here? He's so cute. Electricidad estática. So it's in Spanish also. And don't forget, we're always looking for those little books that we're wanting to share with everyone. So that's the other thing that you can do as well, is it's important that you try to share in your commercials something like the cultural books from your community. This one is How Hollyhocks Came to New Mexico, or your science STEM experiments, which are really great. You might want to take the opportunity to highlight in your commercials also about your activities, like this is story time, todos niños listos para leer. Or you might want to just talk up your reading programs. So whether it's going to Explora to the website and downloading on the programming librarian, follow us. And the STEAM activity shares the science behind it and how it is relevant to people's lives and careers. And don't forget, there's a wonderful book list that is available to read more together with the families. And I love that. It's always available somewhere on the activity sheet. Visit Programming Librarian, and adios, amigos. Thank you, Miguel. I'm tossing it to you.
Thanks, Flo. And I think this is a great segue, Flo and Veronica's great presentations talking about, cultural competency skills and really what it means to create an effective STEAM program. I'll be discussing about how to build those relationships, which is really one of the first steps with engaging our Latino, Latina, Latinx communities. And one of the things I really recommend you do is to survey your landscape of your library and really be thoughtful about identifying your existing relationships with community partners that may serve our Latinx communities. And so this is it's as simple as really writing it down, saying, this examples might be the school districts or local faith organizations or local nonprofits. And it's the first step to what may seem to be a daunting project. And then also research any community groups. This is where your librarian skill set really comes in handy. Understand where locate. So many community groups now have websites. They have resources online. And also to look on social media. It's really important and really easy to look at this digital presence that some of these groups may have. Searching on Facebook, on Instagram are really great ways to identify what groups are, what they're doing, who the leaders are. And it doesn't have to be formal groups. It doesn't have to be the school district group or a local nonprofit. It could be just a family group or an informal group. And it's a great way to connect or to at least understand what's in your community. And really connect to your local organizations and institutions. Be proactive about reaching out. Oftentimes in libraries, we wait for our people to come into the building or community partners to come in. But it's important to be out and really understanding what's out in the community as well. And in a virtual environment, this doesn't have to mean physically leaving the library, or in many of our cases, leaving our homes, but really researching online and finding out contact information, emails, all of that good stuff. And also, as you connect with organizations and institutions, being able to understand who your formal community leaders are and informal community leaders. And so what I mean by formal is looking at the school principals, your social workers, looking at faith-based leaders such as rabbis or pastors or priests, and looking at nonprofit board members, things like that. But also looking at informal leaders, folks who are in the community, folks who are out there doing that work that you may hear from institutions or organizations. The informal community leaders are admittedly a little bit harder to come by, but they tend to be parents that are very active in their communities, people that have groups in their in their neighborhoods, things like that. And also connecting with families and individuals. So are there families that already come to the library? How, can you find out more, connecting with them, finding out a little bit more about them. So those are great ways and really quick, quick and not so quick, but effective ways of starting to build relationships. And so really, the next step would be to evaluate how to connect and to think about how to connect with partners. And a great way to start this is to leverage your existing partners. So if you already have a good partnership or you have a good relationship with a teacher or a parent, it's really great to connect with them and ask them more about their experiences, and if they know of anyone else. It's really how you build your network and how you build relationships. It's it's really a friend of a friend, and that's a really great approach. So connecting with existing partners to get their perspective on the landscape, on the community. What do they see as the community, the experiences of communities of the community or communities? And the other piece is really just picking up the phone, especially in a virtual environment. It's important to pick up the phone and call folks that you may have not engaged with previously, and you want, in a way that really speaks to wanting to learn more about them. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And also typing emails. Although we are inundated, because we are inundated with a lot of emails, it's important to make it personal, to not just send a generic email to, 10 people that you've researched, but really make personal emails, try to get contact information. You all remember applying for your jobs, adding that personal touch is always important, and it really relays that your authenticity and your genuine interest in connecting with someone. Additionally, it's really great, and what I've been doing especially during the pandemic, is attending virtual events, whether it's city hosted events such as council meetings or aldermen or alder people meetings, as well as group meetings, whether it's a parent-teacher conference online, or not conference, but parent-teacher group meeting or something like that, or whether it's an open event, or if you look on Facebook and there's a community event that's hosted virtually. I've made some really great one-on-one connections with community members that way, as well as local officials. Just showing up is 90% of really building relationships, especially at first. And then if there are any socially distanced events in person, if you feel comfortable, and obviously there's safety measures taken into consideration, really it's important to try to attend some of these events. It's really, showing up is really important, and having your presence known, even if if it's just a little bit, even if it's just for a moment. And it's not about necessarily speaking or asking to be or to speak at the event, but just showing up and being a representative of the library. And so, just as important as what to say when you show up is important. It's as important to discuss what not to say. The most important piece of advice that I give folks who are trying to engage communities, regardless of what communities they're trying to engage, is to first listen and actively listen. Actively, I can't say that more, is to really reflect on, are you paying attention to what the individual or group is saying or the community member is saying? And then you internally connect their aspirations, connect their goals, connect whatever they're talking about with library resources. This is not an opportunity to start sharing a laundry list of resources, although I've been in situations where I couldn't wait to say, oh, I have a resource for this, or have you checked out this book, or we have this at the library, or this. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for that. But really, when you first connect with an organization or a group, or an individual, is to understand what they're about, really genuinely be interested in what they have to say, their experience in your community, and be okay with the fact that there may not be any tangible steps. Don't say, okay, what are the next steps? What's the next thing we can do here? Be okay with, as an introduction, just introducing yourself. And it's not necessarily about, okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a program with you all, or we're going to do this. That's okay to not have a next step. Just building an introduction is a really great first step. And then looking at networking as a leadership habit. So not just networking for the sake of networking, but looking at networking as a part of seeing the library as a leader in the community. So there are definitely things to say. When you're speaking with individuals, with families, with community groups, always ask about issues, barriers, or challenges they face, and take a note of that. It helps to just take a mental note, and that way you're not being distracted by notepads. But if you really struggle with taking notes, then that's okay. And ask about their current events, programs, and services that they're hosting, especially if it's an institution. Or if they're a parent or an individual, ask about events or programs that they attend or services that they go to, whether it's in their community or even outside of the community. And especially with families, ask about goals for their youth and families. It's okay as long as it's, high level. You don't necessarily want to get personal, but it's important to show up and listen and really talk about and really focus on the individual or the group or the institution. This isn't about the library. This is about how understanding your community. And then there is, don't be shy about, if you do see a clear opportunity for collaboration, to talk about it. But again, this is not, I don't advocate for jumping on and trying to make something happen that isn't that, or forcing something. But if you see a clear connection, or if you see something that might be an opportunity, leave the door open saying, hey, this is what we're doing, or, I have an idea, can we follow up? And then leave the door open. Because especially for new relationships, there's not that trust yet. And you want to build that trust through through conversation and relationship building. And so after you have, after initial conversations with either through emails, cold calling, or just connecting with existing partners, you want to understand that not all new conversations lead to partnerships, and that's okay. If every conversation led to a partnership, there would be way too many partnerships to take care of anyway. But just be okay with a conversation as a good first step, and really follow up with your own cultural research. As Veronica was mentioning, there's a lot of nuances to really engaging in diverse communities, and understand that you may not understand why someone said something or did something in the conversation, but it's up to you to really understand what the context of that might have been, and do some own cultural research, whether talking to someone you trust, who trusts you, who you can share your questions or comments with, but don't put the onus on this new relationship to answer your questions about, oh, why is that? Why do you do that? Or what are those? I think there's some cultural sensitivity that needs to happen there, and really do your own work. And really identify the tools that are needed to move the relationship further. So if you engage a community that is primarily speaks Spanish or another language, are translations or translators needed? If it's a family that doesn't have access to daycare or a babysitter, can you provide some kind of support for children or young children who can't participate in a program that you have? Is there staff that's bilingual, not necessarily in the library, but in the community? Is there a way to reach out to get bilingual volunteers? Or is there a trusted third party that should be involved in the program that you know will be present so that the community feels more comfortable showing up to a library event? So these are all considerations that are important. And also, as Flo alluded to, contact your local experts. Contact anyone who has access to community knowledge, and also who may have skill sets in the STEAM field, whether it's a professional gardener or an expert or a self-taught gardener or a self-taught artist or things like that. I found incredible success at my library reaching out to the local community to leverage their expertise. And then all of this really are really great steps that lead into a community dialogue, that can lead into a community dialogue. So following some of these steps, building initial conversations, establishing relationships, building awareness of the library, and you as a person, as a library staff member, can really lead into some next steps, which are community dialogues. So community dialogues are important because they can be as formal or as informal as you'd like. And to start a community dialogue, you really want to leverage your existing and new partners. So you want to talk to your existing partners, tell them about your idea to host a community dialogue, and also reach out to your new partners because now they know who you are, and it's always great to just open the door. And explain and send any facilitation questions. There's great resources on community dialogue questions, ones that were alluded to earlier in the presentation by Kellyanne, and make room during these community dialogues for one-on-one and group conversations to really allow people to talk in comfortable settings. And you can do this through Zoom. You can have breakout rooms, and you can have general conversations. And identify translators, or even consider hosting a community dialogue in the native language. We've had success hosting Zoom conversations in Spanish because we were able to find community members that spoke Spanish that were willing to help the library out, as well as our bilingual staff, although I recognize that we're in a privileged position by having bilingual staff. And then follow up with community leaders and individuals on the next steps and on the information you gathered. It's important to not be perceived as an organization that's coming in, requesting information from the community and taking that and hoarding the information, or not sharing, not really having an outcome about how that looks, so that the community doesn't feel abused or taken advantage of. So that's really sort of a 101. There's a lot more detail that each of these components have, but it serves to get all of us started on what it means to build a community and start building relationships within your community.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of the presenters. Just incredible information. A lot of these resources that they mentioned are included in that resource list. Brooks has dropped it in the chat a couple times, so you can scroll through and find that. That resource list is also on our StarNet blog, so you can check it out there. And I've already made a note of a few new resources that were dropped that I will be adding to the blog after the webinar. So we want to turn it over to you guys if you have any questions at this point. There have been a few in the Q&A feature, so thank you for using that. And it looks like those have been answered, but I want to open this up to you if anyone else has any other questions. All of the presenters' contact information is also included in that resource bank. So if you get a question later on after the webinar, feel free to contact them or myself or any of the contact information on the resource bank. And if there aren't questions, let's see. Awesome, we are getting some. So if anyone, so Beth says interested in engaging via volunteerism. If you could expand a little more on that in the chat, and I invite any of the panelists to unmute yourself and take a stab at answering any of these things about engaging via volunteerism. I'm interpreting that as maybe engaging by volunteering with different groups in your community as maybe a way of opening up a partnership or just starting to build those relationships. If that's what you meant by that, I think that sounds like a really great way to put yourself out there and start to build some community partnerships just by going out and volunteering.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in, I think I think that's incredibly powerful. You know, the challenge is obviously capacity and time, but to me, I did fail to include that but I couldn't even agree more. I think I found some of my most successful partnerships to start as a volunteer, either through as a librarian or as just an individual with, you know, who wants to participate in civic life. But volunteering is a great way to really focus on some of these important community issues and get to know individuals.
I'd like to follow up on that as well. This is Flo. I mentioned Enlace, and that's engaging Latino communities in education. I think I reversed the wording when I put it in the chat room. They're usually found in your local college, but the organization always encourages the students who all speak Spanish to participate as an ambassador, the college students. That's how they do their work study. So they're always looking for ways to do programs. I know when we did prime time at our library, we used them for the daycare component when we did the breakaway. Whenever we did the breakaway rooms, of course, we did have the luxury of having another computer whenever we did do something. But I think that Brooks mentioned that cell phones are wonderful. Most of the time someone has something like that. If not, at least prepare some pre-kits. This is something that we do with Explora as well. We prepare some kits and we send them along to the families so they can work in another room with other family members together and create another little STEAM project. The volunteers that I really had a lot of experience with and a lot of success in STEAM was the college students that are wanting to be medical students. When they came in one time, they wanted some ideas, and when they were working on the heart, they went to the local, this might sound a little morbid, but to the place where they kill cows. I hate to say that out loud, but anyway, they do get rid of a lot of the things that are there, but a lot of the medical students do use the eyeballs and use the heart to dissect and show what happens. So it's really a nice opportunity for you to engage in the medical field and invite them to come. I think our last session was really popular, and don't forget about herpetologists. Everyone out there is really wanting to volunteer, and you don't have to pay them, but they'll come in and put the science field in there. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that, Flo. We do have another question in the Q&A. What is the expectation as we write the grant to incorporate all of this amazing information? I might hand that over to Kellyanne if you have ideas. But you know, if there is an expectation that as you guys create these, write the grant, if we're expecting you to incorporate this information. Any thoughts on the STEAM equity application?
Yes, I can actually talk about that. This is Phoebe. For the application, so for those of you who are part of those who have been selected to apply for the STEAM Equity Project and submit a full application, these are all wonderful resources for you to use. This webinar, as well as the webinar hosted just a couple weeks ago about gender equity programming. So I think it's really great in considering, you know, what ideas you would like to take from this webinar and put towards your grant application. There's not necessarily an expectation like we want you to specifically use Flo's program, or you have to exactly refer to a quote or something like that. Nothing that specific, but these are all great tools to inspire you, to call back on, to create something off of your own. So no strict expectation, but these are all part of the resources that we want to offer our applicants to help as you prepare your applications. If you have any other questions about, what other expectations or anything specific to the grant application, just give me a shout out via email at bbrown@ala.org. I'm going to put my email in the chat in just a moment.
Thank you. We have a question for Miguel. At the very end of your presentation, you said something about, in quotes, so they don't feel exploited or taken advantage of. I missed what came before. Could you please repeat that?
Yeah, happy to do so. So in general, and obviously it depends, and there's different communities, and there's a lot of diversity within how institutions engage with the Latinx communities. But there's a lot of issues with going into communities, especially as a quote unquote outsider, whether it's a library institution, a city organization, or another nonprofit, gathering information about the Latino communities and then going away. And so it's this idea of not sort of taking advantage of the Latino community and saying, okay, yeah, we know this about the Latino community, or we found out all their needs, now we're going to figure this out ourselves. And so it's about true community engagement is really about integrating yourselves into the community in a deeper way than just gathering information and taking it back to you to the library and then figuring it out. It's about saying, okay, we have this information. How can we work with you together, with whatever we found out from those community conversations? So let's say there's like, oh, we need, we would love to see more of this, or these are my aspirations, or this is what I'm having issues with. How can we work together using the community assets themselves, meaning individuals, families, to work together to help improve, to help evaluate the results of that conversation, as opposed to just taking the data and running with it, which is what a lot of cities do. They take that data, they say they've done the work, and then they really haven't. They've just really poached that information.
Thank you so much. Looks like we have one more question in the Q&A. What about engaging with members of the community who are iterant or non-permanent? I live in a community with a large population of seasonal farm workers.
So I live in a farming community. This is Veronica. I live in the middle of Central California, which is farming. One of the things that I have used as a tool is reaching out to our migrant education that they have at the Tulare County Office of Ed. And then also the migrant education, they have that in California, and it's just a really great program that connects families with all types of resources. And they also have an educational portion of it where they have one-on-one tutoring, and my library is used, our community room, quite a bit for one-on-one tutoring that the migrant education department has. And I, whenever they're here and I'm speaking to them, I usually come up and I'm like, hi, how are you? How's it going? We're having this event that's going on. And I give a flyer out, but it's also just the everyday, just kind of greeting them, making sure that they feel welcome, making sure that they feel like making sure that they feel welcomed. But yeah, that's the resource that I've used, the migrant education. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are just about at the end of time. Thank you so much for all of your questions. I do, just for the remaining minute, I'm going to just put this question up here just for you to consider as you leave with all of this information and new ideas. But think about, what is one thing that doesn't cost any money that your library could do now to start implementing culturally responsive programs? So that could be sending an email, looking for virtual events to attend, and just really getting just start to make those connections with the people in your community that you want to connect with. So we'll leave that with you as a kind of, you know, go forth and try to even just start small and simple. But anything you do will help you on your path to making culturally responsive programs. So once again, thank you so much to all of our presenters today. Their contact information is on the link bank, so feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions or want to bounce some ideas around. And thank you so much for joining us today.